So, good morning, John. How you going?
I'm good. I'm up.
That's good. And you've just finished the Dragon Trail.
Yeah, first ever multi-day mountain bike race for me. So.
Oh, excellent. And the thing that I actually want to chat to you this morning about is the Cook Strait swim that you did.
Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about that and what it involved?
Yeah, so it's one of the seven great sort of marathon swims of the world. So these are the English Channel. I think there's one from Catalina Island to Long Beach in California. There's one between two of the islands in Japan. So it's very, very popular. But obviously New Zealand had its borders closed for nearly 2.5 years. So my coach Phil, who supports a lot of the international swimmers when they come over to do it, he said to us, well, you know, if any of you guys want to do anything, this is the year, because I'm not going to have any international customers at all. Yeah, so it was sort of the end of a three-year project. But the swim itself, it's not that far. It's only 21k, I think, point to point. But there are very, very, very strong currents and tides in the strait. And rather weirdly, there's a different current on both island shores. So people get sort of bent into a big figure S. So you can wind up doing far more than 21k. I think I did 27. But one of my friends I was supporting a couple of years ago, she did over 40k. Because the currents just weren't coming across the strait, so she just spent about 4 hours swimming due north with quite a strong current behind her, but not going in the right direction. And you just can't pick it. It's just what happens.
Yep. How did you choose the time to actually do the swim?
Oh, that's all about Phil. But in theory, what you do is you choose a day that's sort of within about 2 or 3 days of low tide, because you really want the tide difference to be as small as possible, because unless you're less than 6 hours, when the tide turns, it washes you backwards. So when the tide interval is small, you can basically just sort of stay in the same place. But outside this tide window, the current's so strong it will wash you way back to behind where you started, so you never really get anywhere.
You just keep swimming and swimming and swimming.
That's exactly right, yeah. And then the other trick is you start the swim just before the top of the tide. Mm-hmm. So as you start, you sort of get this huge help and you sort of get bulleted out of whichever island you're starting next to. So to begin with, you think you're swimming like a complete legend, because you're doing 5 or 6 kilometres an hour, and it's official, it's on Garmin, and you go, well, in that case the record's looking pretty dangerous. And then of course after about 4 hours you just grind to a complete halt, and then it's all very different. But that's so that's the sort of pattern of how you tend to time it.
And so how long were you preparing to do the swim?
Well, I did the first year of lockdown,
Was that 2020? 2019?
Well, it was sort of the summer 2020-21, Northern Hemisphere people. So that's the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, that summer. So I, Phil, the coach, where he's dealing with people who haven't done massive endurance swims, he gets them to swim the long axis of Lake Taupo, and Lake Taupo is the big lake in the centre of the North Island of New Zealand. So that's 40 kilometres. Mm-hmm. So it's technically very easy, but it's a really, really long way.
Yeah.
So that took me just over 14 hours. But it's a really good stepping stone, because it gets you used to the training, nutrition, getting inside your head for such a long time, physical conditioning and stuff, and it builds your strength endurance specific to swimming very well. And I thought that was me done, actually. I thought, right, okay, that'll do, get on with life. And then the following year we still had a lockdown, so we couldn't travel outside New Zealand. So I thought, oh well, I suppose I might as well give Cook Strait a go. And Cook Strait, where I live in Wellington is at the northern end of Cook Strait, so it's the very, very bottom tip of the North Island of New Zealand. So it's sort of relevant to me, because it's part of my world. So I'm not super keen on the idea of ocean swimming, because it's full of sharks and
other bitey things
and that sort of thing. So and it's cold as well. It's much
Yeah.
colder than the lakes in summer. But I thought, well, it's a pretty epic thing and everything's sort of in place, so I should really give it a go. But the trouble is you have to build up all over again. I often say to people the training's actually quite like training for an Ironman.
Yeah.
It's quite a similar volume of time.
Is it all just devoted to swimming?
But it's all swimming.
Yes.
And Phil's very old school, so he's got no time for strength and conditioning or anything like that.
You just swim and you swim a lot.
He says if you're going to swim a long way, the way that you get ready for it is by swimming a really long way. So that's very simple. So at peak, I was doing 50k in 1 week. So that's about 17 hours with breaks and stuff like that. Which is very like an Ironman. The trouble is it's just one thing, so it's way more boring.
Is that all in the pool, or is that some open water swimming as well?
It's a good question, Karen. So I thought it would all be outside because it's more realistic. But he's quite big on speed, so he says the problems with inexperienced marathon swimmers is they're too slow, so they sort of swim along and then they sort of turn into zombies, and then they just sort of spod. Whereas in the pool you've got the pace clock and you can keep your eye on time and force yourself to keep your pace up. So the first season I did a lot in the pool, and actually the second season, but as it turned out, my slot for Cook Strait last year, I think, I can't remember when the first one was, it was like sort of early March or something, and the weather was rubbish, it was too windy, so we couldn't go. And then you wait a couple of weeks for the next low tide, and then the weather was rubbish and I couldn't do it. And then by the time we got into April, the weather was rubbish again, and it was starting to get quite cold. Even colder than it normally was. So that was the point where I just decided that I wouldn't have made it. So we had a third go this year. So the plan this season was to go much earlier. So I think my window was sort of late January, early February. Which is probably when the Strait's as warm as it gets. And as it turned out, that was brilliant because it really was very warm. We had a really, really nice summer. But there are still sort of sections where it gets very, very cold. You get these things called upwellings where water comes from the bottom of the Strait, and literally in 10 meters it goes from being sort of 18, 19 degrees to 15, 16 degrees, and
it's quite a temperature drop.
Oh my God, what's this?
So with the missed attempts or attempts that you couldn't do, is that you've built up to complete it, and then how do you maintain your training, or what changes there to then wait another 2 weeks and then eventually
you mean this sort of sawtooth? And that's a really good question. So if you're doing a key event like your mountain biking or Ironman or something like that, you've got a date, and you do your training and you plan your periodization, and you build up, and you've got and then you carbo load into the event, and then you come off in a taper, and it's all very orderly and very progressed. And so you do all of that, but you've got absolutely no idea when you're going to be going. So you come into the window is 4 to 6 days long. You've got no idea which, if any of the days, you're going to be swimming. And Phil's quite big on, he says, taper, it's just a load of rubbish. You guys just need to keep swimming, just don't swim as much. Make sure you're not too tired. They think it's funny too. So, but that's exactly right. So you have to, you ease off into the window, and then generally, looking at the long range forecast, you'll have a sense of when in the window is looking good, but you don't actually find out when you're going until the night before. So you've got all your stuff ready, you've got your crew ready and all that stuff, but they're still checking because the weather's really variable in Cook Strait, so there's no point even trying if the weather's not going to behave itself. But that first season, it was ridiculous. So we did the whole taper thing. Managed to bought me a cup of tea. The nutrition podcast. Nutrition, cup of tea.
Yes, very important in the mornings.
So and through the taper, it's sort of a bit like active recovery, really. You're trying to swim every day, but not very much, and it's quite light. It's just to keep your body from sort of stiffening up and everything. And sort of maintaining a light carbing, I'd say.
Yes.
Because you don't want to overcarb yourself for such a long time. But then, of course, if the window doesn't happen, you've then got 2 weeks. So then you have to ramp straight up to these really big volumes for a week and then come off it again. So I did that 3 times that first year. And you look at my volumes and it looks like this sawtooth. It's quite funny. Yeah, and then we didn't even get to do it.
So how did you adjust mentally, I guess, to those sort of sawtoothing in your training and then to not actually do it? Like, do you mentally prepare in a certain way for undertaking it, or is it just something that you naturally take in your stride, I guess?
No, that was okay. I mean, it's very busy, all these sporty things, if you take them seriously. There's an awful lot to do. So, there's lots of stuff to get ready and people to organise and things like that. So, and even when things aren't playing out according to plan, that's also something that needs organising.
Yes.
So I didn't find that too much of a problem, really. And I didn't find it... I was very apprehensive the first year because it's really hard.
Yeah.
When the conditions weren't great, I mean, in a sense, it was a bit of a relief not to have to face it. So I didn't find that hard. And even at the end of the season, when it didn't come off, I was fine. I mean, we'd had a great summer. Me and all my swimming friends, we'd been on trips all around the country and made our own fun. And everything was cancelled. That was the other thing. Last year, absolutely everything got cancelled for COVID. So we'd sort of planned a trip to go and do a race. Race didn't happen, so we just got the map out and went, right, okay, let's see where we can go. And that was really fun.
Just checking, are you okay in the rain, or do you want to go under the cover?
I'm fine.
Okay, great. Well, it's kind of like swimming, but not. That also get onto the nutrition side of things now. What did you do, I guess, how did you plan or prepare nutrition?
So I think the story starts with my late Topor swim. So I said to Phil, what should I eat? Right? And he said, well, what did you do in Ironman? Because that obviously worked. So I did Ironman for 6 years, and you get very good at managing your nutrition, and you learn a lot about sort of glycogen conservation, and that's really the key to these ultra. I'm sure you know all this stuff. What's the audience for this? Are these nerdy, super expert nutrition people?
No, just general
people?
Population as well. Yep. So
okay, so the philosophy of ultra endurance nutrition, as I understand it, is you start the day with the glycogen that's in your blood system, and you finish the day, hopefully, with a little bit of glycogen left in your blood system. And if you judge that wrong, that's called hitting the wall. So that's where you completely run out of energy and you can't do anything at all. And the strategy is to try and, as I think about it, you sort of top yourself up with carbohydrates. So you're trying to burn the carbohydrates, and you can replenish carbohydrates in real time. But glycogen takes several days to recover, and that's why hitting the wall is so serious. So in an Ironman, famously, you carbo load before the event, so you're trying to top your carbohydrate levels up, and then you sort of over carb in the first half of the race, and then as the race goes on and your system becomes a bit more delicate, you can't tolerate as much carbohydrate, so you have to sort of reduce the concentration, otherwise you sort of get stomach cramps and stuff like that. So I'd spent years trying to get this right for Ironman, and I had this system with, this is why on Ironman people eat on the bike a lot. So I was eating little salted potatoes, and I had little sandwiches with Vegemite and peanut butter. And so Phil goes, right, well, that's what you need to do, same thing. So it's like, really? Okay. So I had all my stuff, and I was swimming along in a practice swim, and he goes, how's it going? And I went, well, they're a bit dry. And he goes, well, it's a lake, you can just dip them in the lake. So it's just like, dip your sandwiches in the lake. And that's because Lake Topor's really warm, so when I did it, it was 21 degrees.
Oh, that's really quite warm.
So it's fine, and you can stop and tread water and chat to people, and your transitions don't have to be fast at all. But the problem with Cook Strait is it's so much colder. So I think I said earlier, stretches of my swim were 16 degrees. It can be that the entire swim can be 16 degrees and colder. And that's so cold that if you stop moving for even 30 seconds, you start getting cold.
Yeah.
And that's a disaster. So solids were completely out. And that meant I had to completely rethink what I was doing. And again, I said to Phil, well, you know, what do you use? Or did you use? And he goes, well, I don't know if they make it anymore, but I used to use a stuff called Complan. So Complan, it's also called Sustagen.
Oh, right,
And one of my doctor friends said to me, oh yes, I know about that. That's what I give my octogenarian patients, you know, these sort of crumbly old people who can't eat properly. So it's a complete meal supplement. And another one of my friends just burst out laughing. He goes, Complan? God, it's not 1985, Phil. This is so old school. But you can get it in the supermarket.
Yeah.
And it's really cheap. It's like $20 for a box, and it's got absolutely everything in it. So long as you like it, it's a big if.
Well, Sustagen, like the Sustagen that you can get nowadays, and like Sustagen Sport, like it actually doesn't taste so bad.
Yep. No, well, I was amazed actually, Karen. So that's what I practiced with. It's a little bit lactosey. It's quite milky.
Yes.
So at really high concentrations, that's a problem. So anyway, so I was getting all this ready, and then one of my mates who crewed for me, so she was a pro triathlete in her day, which is a really, really good pro triathlete, and she's still very interested in all the detail. And she goes, right, John, show me what you're eating. And I went, oh, okay, so you know that bit on the side of the box that you never read? So I had to send her the bit on the side of the box that you never read, and she looks at it and she goes, so what concentrations? And I went, oh, blah, 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 blah. And she goes, well, it's not enough. So you almost need twice the carbohydrate concentration per feed in order for this to work. And she'd been listening to an interview with, there's a Norwegian triathlete called Gustav Iden, who's famously won lots of things recently. And there, we've almost gone out of this ketosis sort of phase of nutrition back to old school. It's all about carbs.
Yes.
So they have hyper high levels of carbohydrate, and they train themselves to tolerate it. And so Sarah was looking at what something equivalent for me would be, and she said, well, obviously, you know, you need to be able to handle it.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what we did. So we increased, I don't think we did twice, but I think we had half as much again.
Yep.
So, but it was still less strong than the standard mix-up that you're meant to have with Sustagen. So that's what I did, and I alternated flavours.
Yep.
So we have vanilla,
and chocolate.
They do a double chocolate.
Ah.
Do not recommend.
Okay, too strong? Too chocolatey?
They do a strawberry. Didn't even try that.
Oh God, that sounds a bit scary.
Very, very, very synthetic. It's like, you know, vivid pink.
Yeah.
So I didn't bother with that. But the chocolate's really nice, and the vanilla was okay. So I sort of alternated them, and then I'd have various things for a bit of variety, right? So you know, it's like mushed up bananas with lemon juice, and a bit of maple syrup, something like that, in a little
like squeezy bottle.
Squidgy bottle, So that was quite good. And then one of my friends who's Irish, she swears by leek and potato soup.
All right.
So I had a little thermos with leek and potato soup, and we noticed I had a bit of an energy dip after that. So I wonder whether that wasn't actually complete enough compared to everything else. So I really just kept packing the Sustagen away for, about 7 hours. And then we got to one feed, and they gave me the bottle, and it just splurted straight back out. And Phil goes, I think he's had enough. Time to get on the Coke. So this is another old Ironman trick. It's flat Coke at the end of the race. It's, you know, it's got caffeine, which settles your stomach. It's got lots of sugar and stuff in it. And, you know, and also you're used to it.
A bit of a mental boost as well.
Boom, get that in. So that was what we had for the last 2 hours, just Coke.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever want to see Sustagen again in my life.
Oh, definitely not.
I think we worked it out. I think I took more Sustagen than most octogenarians take in a week in one day. But it did the job.
Yes.
It did the job. And I was saying to Mandy yesterday, because she's not as systematic about her nutrition as you are. And I think it would help the back end of her races if she could get into her carb management more. But we had a couple of training swims in the summer where I was feeling really, really flat, and then I had some of this stuff, and literally within about 5 minutes I felt great, and I'm absolutely sure it's just it got my carb levels back up, and it's sort of simple kick, but it's not a sugar kick. It's.
But you also have like receptors in your mouth that help with carbohydrate absorption. That then, you know, it affects your brain as well quite quickly.
Oh, really?
So, and that's where there is a bit more research around, like people doing mouth rinse. You know, if it's a short, maybe high intense exercise, or having some carbohydrates can help straight away, you know, with that feeling of being a bit more energized, or, you know, kind of just getting that energy hit sort of straight away. Because some of it is absorbed. It doesn't have to go through your digestive system. To have an effect straight away. So
it's almost like a placebo. It's just tricking your brain into feeling better, sort of thing.
And like, I mean, even with you know, events like the mountain biking stuff and probably the swimming as well, you know, so much of it is a mental thing as well, staying focused and being able to do that. And so your brain still requires so much energy to be able to do that, and not just your muscles as well. So it's almost like you know, you've got to fuel your brain and your body to be able to perform.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But you're dead right. I mean, that's exactly what happened. So not very scientific, my training. It's 1980s supplements for old people.
And it fueled your Cook Strait swim. But that's the great, I guess, thing. Like, nutrition doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be, you know, the fanciest, you know, sports nutrition brand out there. It just needs to tick, you know, certain boxes to make sure that you're getting the energy that you need to be able to do the activity that you want to complete.
No, I do agree. I mean, with Ironman, I played around with all of this stuff for ages, and you're right. Anything in a wrapper with a brand name on it was generally too concentrated.
Yep.
And I found normal food was really good in Ironman, because you've got enough time to eat things and stuff. So that's why potatoes and sandwiches and stuff are way better than go faster stuff. But I must say, the Sustagen, you know, because it's not really branded. I mean, it's branded in as much as people need to know what they're looking for in the supermarket, but they don't push it or anything like that. But it's so much cheaper than Go Faster Sports Nutrition. I mean, it was like, you know, a tenth the price for the amount of stuff that I took with me, which is amazing.
And with your, like, with the swim, like the sort of, I guess, the mental side of it, staying focused for such a long time through that, do you do any, or how do you approach that side of the swim, and I guess any other training that you do?
Oh, that's a good question for swimming. So it's a long time to be in your own head. I think, I mean, the better story is the story about Lake Taupo, because it is exactly the same for the entire swim, because it's a lake. So, and you only do it when there's no wind.
And that was longer than your actual Cook Strait swim, wasn't it?
So Cook Strait was 9.25 hours, I think, and Taupo was 14 and some hours. So it's nearly 5 hours.
Wow, quite a lot.
And obviously you've got things like, you start in the dark, so you've got the sun coming up, and that's, you know, and things like that sort of make it. And as soon as there's a wind, that's something to think about. But the rest of the time you are just in your own head. So a lot of people do things like counting and stuff like that, singing songs. A lot of people sing songs to themselves. But one of my tricks was, which I've done on other events before, it's retracing runs in my head. So I had a bunch of runs I used to do at university, it's like 30 years ago, and I found that I was sort of thinking, what shall I think about, and I sort of tracing my way, sort of this old run I used to do, and then it was so good, but I couldn't remember bits of it. So I then went on Google Earth, or whatever it's called, you know, Google Maps, where you zoom
in and see
the terrain, and Street View, that's what it's called. That's right. So, but I found that as well as the stuff they do, in some places in the world, people have done their own Street View. So they'd gone round the towpaths of Oxford on a bike with a little thing on their helmet, and they'd actually retraced my entire run, you know. So I managed to step my way through the whole thing in training. So I did that for 3 or 4 of my favourite old runs, so I to try and refresh it in my mind, so that I've got that ready to go. And then Phil's quite good. He's always got a few questions to ask you at each feed. You feed every 30 minutes, so if he notices you're starting to get a bit twitchy, he goes, "Just want to ask you this, John." And then you put your hand
so he asks you, and then you do have to answer.
And then he doesn't ask you the answer.
Oh, right. So
he's just trying to keep you busy. It's like, I've got this great answer for you, and
you don't even want to know the answer.
It's so sad. Yeah, but the Cook Strait swim, I actually found my mind was pretty busy the whole time because it's tidal and there was so much going on. So the first 2 hours, as I say, you had this sort of rush from the beginning, and I knew I was swimming really quick, I could feel it, and so I was sort of trying to swim like a sort of surfy, where you sort of try and get your upper body up out of the wave and you're sort of trying to get over. So that's slightly technical, so I was trying to make the most of the help that the wind and the tide was giving me there. And then you had this sort of middle section, but it doesn't really get boring for a couple of hours. So there was sort of maybe 3 hours at the end. But then the last bit is very technical. So that's the bit where I hit this upwelling. The temperature dropped really dramatically and there was an offshore current. And that's where you absolutely cannot take your foot off the gas, because as soon as you slow down, you start slipping. And then you slip along the coastline and then you miss whatever it is you're trying to hit on land. So I had this old school coach giving me all this, and I was really, really working hard. But one thing Sarah did with me actually at one point, where I was slightly away with the fairies, we had a lot of fun. It hasn't really taken off in Australia, but there's a sport I discovered when I was a bit bored after Ironman called swim run. It's a Scandinavian thing.
Right.
So you swim with your shoes on. And you run with a wetsuit, and you don't stop. So so in Swedish it's called Ötille, which means island to island. So in Sweden they have these big archipelago, and you swim out to an island, run over the island, jump in, swim to the next island, run over the island, and it's great fun. And you do it in pairs with a bungee cord, and it's so ridiculous. It's great. There was a British events company who ran a few races like that in New Zealand, which was really fun. And anyway, everything stopped in COVID, and very sadly they went bust. So one of the things Sarah asked me while I was swimming, she goes, "So John, why do you think Brecca went bust, and what do you think you could have done?" It was like an exam question. So I was like, "Oh well, if it was strategically, they should have."
So you need to really choose your crew people very well and make sure that they have some great questions lined up through that swim.
That's so true. That's so true. Yeah, I mean, I do say to people, it's so much about the team, because in a way, I mean, all you got to do is do what you're told, really.
Yeah.
You've got this legend marathon swimmer sort of in charge of everything. So Phil, I mean, you should give him a bit of a plug for you. If anyone's interested in doing this, I think it's cookstraitswim.org.nz or .co, can't remember. But Phil Rush is he's one of the great marathon swimmers of history. So he's older than me. He must be nearly 60 now. And when he was in his 20s.
Okay, we'll resume with Phil again. Back to Phil.
So the team around you, they sort of make everything. And I often say, what I had to do is actually very easy, because you just have to do what you're told. So there's all these people giving you instructions and supporting you and whatever, and doing things for you. So you've literally just got to swim at the pace they want you to swim. But one of the key parts of my team, I've talked about him quite a lot, is Phil Rush. So he's swim coach who supports these marathon swimmers. But and again, it's a thing about living where I do in Wellington, which is where he lives. So Phil's claim to fame is that 35 years ago, Phil broke the 1-, 2-, and 3-way crossing records of the English Channel on the same day.
Wow.
So he and the 1-way record has now been broken, but no one's ever got even remotely close to breaking the 2- and 3-way records, and that's extraordinary, because this is the English Channel. He holds records for Cook Strait and things like that, which are still untouched, but it's a long way away, and whatever. The English Channel, that is the absolute pinnacle of marathon swimming, and everyone's tried to have a go at some of these records. And there was a wonderful American swimmer, Sarah Thomas, a couple of years ago, she did a 4-way crossing of the English Channel. It's absolutely extraordinary.
Wow,
It may never happen again.
Yeah.
Very well conditioned and had this weather window that was long enough.
Yeah.
When Sarah Thomas finished her second crossing of the English Channel, Phil had already finished his third crossing. That's how fast he was going.
Wow.
So, I've had him in my corner. He's been coaching me for 10 years. He knows me really well. And so, so to have him, I've talked about Sarah, my former triathlete friend, and she's done heaps of swimming with me, so she knows me well too.
Yeah.
And then I had a bunch of other friends on the boat, and the idea is we were going to rotate the feeders, but it was too rough, so they just spent the whole day on the boat drinking coffee and doing my social media, which was prolific.
Oh, fantastic. And just on the crew, how many people did you have crewing for you, or do you need to have crewing for you?
It's huge. Cook Strait is better serviced than these other big swims I was talking about. So in Cook Strait you have a big boat. And the big boat has, obviously it's got a skipper, it's actually got a navigator on it. So a navigator is somebody who knows Cook Strait and they know all the currents and the tides. So what they're doing is they're plotting your incremental progress, and they're trying to work out what the currents are going to do as you progress,
right?
So that they can tell your I don't know what you'd describe me as, your sort of project manager, the guy in the boat with you, whereabouts you should be trying to land, particularly.
So they did a pretty good job with you in terms of, you only did an extra 5K.
That's right.
Really?
That's right.
Yeah.
And the day I did it was another attempt, which was a bunch of young boys, sort of competitive swimmer boys, who clearly hadn't done very much long swimming. So we set off and we were together, and then, because they're young, they got away from me. But my navigator took a better route, and I nearly caught them up. It's great. But I swam a K and a half shorter than they did. So that's the reason. So that was good. And then, like I say, on the rubber boat, you've got Phil sort of running operations, and then I had one of my friends feeding, and then the idea was we'd have 3 of them, so 2 of them on the boat could talk to each other, and then the third one would be on the rubber boat, except that isn't what happened. Sarah was on the boat for 9.5 hours. So it's a little village that you've got coming with you, which is quite friendly, because logistically you start at the closest point to the other island, and then you finish wherever you finish. Just depends on what the tides do. So the big boat will take you from the marina to the start point, then you hop out and do the swim, and then everyone gets back in the big boat, and then you go back to the marina. So it's like a big sort of loop. And it would take too long doing it in a small boat, because these are quite big distances. I mean, it's sort of an hour cruising to get to the start, and sometimes about an hour and a half to get back. So it would take ages if you did it in the little IRB. I think it would be very cold.
And how is the recovery from something like that?
It's very like something like an Ironman. I found, you after a few days mentally you feel fine, and you think, I am the king of the world, and then you try and do something and you think, I have no energy at all. So I reckon it took me about a month to get back to normal. Not even swimming things, just any form of activity, high intensity activity was really knackering, and I was sleeping for Africa. It was but I suppose a lot of these things, when you've done it a lot of times beforehand, I often talk about your sort of endurance kit bag. You know what things feel like, you know what to do when certain things happen, you know how to prepare for things, you know how to get yourself out of holes when you're in a hole. Because even the mountain biking, actually, there was a bit of that going on. I realised, listening to you do your talk about nutrition the other night, I thought, God, I'm being so amateur about this. Normally I would be all over this. I would have totally thought about eating into the event and how I was going to structure it. And then, of course, we're here and you can't get anything. So you go to the supermarket and they've just got sugary muesli bars, which are useless because they're like little short fuse sugar hits. But in Australia, people, you can get Aunt Betty's creamed rice in little plastic tubs, and you rip the lid off
I had exactly those too for after the races.
I had it during the race
yesterday. Did you?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ado was saying it's an old pro cycling hack. In the middle of a race, you have this sort of protein and sugar hit. But that was great actually. But if only I'd thought about that. We had these weird aid stations with fruit and fruitcake and lollies.
Well, some of them, for some of the high intensity, I use gels a lot for racing more, and it is that for longer stuff I'll use a bit more solid food, but for short, this sort of high intensity stuff, easy to carry, doesn't take up a lot of space, and sort of quick energy for that, where you can just keep pumping it in, and especially if it's sort of a little bit hotter as well, but yeah, for longer events.
But this is the difference. You see, the speed you're going, it is quite a short race.
Yes.
The speed I'm going, it is quite a long day.
Also,
particularly the second day. That was a very long day.
Yes.
And that was not a high fuse, quick hit day at all. That was a proper. And I thought about it. I thought, if I'd been doing that as a single day thing, I would have almost taken sandwiches. I think.
Yes.
It was such a long day.
Yep. It is, and it's quite a I guess quite an adventure, for that second stage.
Yeah.
And did you even have the opportunity to do much, mountain bike training before you came into this?
No.
Yeah.
No, because I talked about the month recovery.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was about 2 weeks ago when I got through all of that.
Yes.
So I went for a few rides.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm there for a good time.
Yes.
But not there for speed. I'm not a very good cyclist anyway, so.
That's a pretty amazing effort, in itself, to be able to do that. Just to come and enjoy the riding and go through it. It was,
Mandy's she's sort of you, really.
She did fantastic. It was so great when she popped up, and I was like, oh my God, amazing. Yeah.
This wonderful network where you all know each other from other countries and things.
Yeah. Well, it's a great thing, and I'm not sure if it's like that with swimming, but bikes, and you meet different people at different races, and then you cross paths at other races or that sort of thing, and you just meet a great bunch of people from all over the world, really. Yeah.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. No, it's been really fun actually. I've enjoyed it. Particularly enjoyed yesterday. It was easy.
Yes. Yeah. It was a nice way to finish.
Not a great technical mountain bike.
Were your getting out of Black Holes mountain biking similar to getting out of Black Holes swimming? Or did you have a different strategy for those?
Didn't really get into any black holes mountain biking, because I went into it thinking I've got to be really, mindful about this, because otherwise I'm going to get really. So I deliberately, on the first day, came last in the time trial. So I didn't have anyone behind me. So I didn't get buzzed by anyone on any of the downhills. So that was good. And then I sort of picked my way up the fields. Everyone else fell back. So that was good. So I didn't put myself in a position. I had no expectations about where I was going to go. It was all about finishing and having a good time, really. So that was it. Yeah. So maybe that is a similar strategy to, because I suppose I'm the world's least competitive person, really. So endurance sports, it's never really been about placing or anything like that. I was saying to Mandy yesterday, because one of the problems with an event like this, so this was a field of 200. So your age groups, very few women actually. Do something about this, people.
And
New Zealand bike races, 40% women.
That's fantastic.
Australian bike races, 10% women.
Yeah.
And
there was more this year than what there has been in the past.
No, that's a real shame. And then race like this as well, because it's grade 3 flow, cross country. It's not gnarly dickhead downhill stuff. But it does mean that within each age group, your placing means nothing. It's just a reflection of who else has turned up and a bit of how well you did. Whereas, and so if you hold yourself to placing outcomes, it's just so fickle, and you can get really sort of down on yourself quite unnecessarily. With Ironman, because the field, and because when I was doing it, I was a 40 to 50-year-old man. That's the big age group. So I found statistically that was, you could say, I want to try and get in the top 25% for the swim, or top 10% for the swim, top 30% for the bike, or something like that. And that was quite a good gauge, because there was enough variety, what's the word, diversity in the field, that it was quite a reliable thing to aim for. But then I got much more into, but even there, do I care? It's just about whether I've done a good job. So execution, I think, is sort of the thing to hold yourself to.
That's a really good point. Yeah, focusing on the process and the journey of almost what you're doing.
No, I agree, Karen. I think at the highest level, racing, that's different again, isn't it? Because you are deliberately looking at what your competitors are doing and changing what you do in order to make sure you beat them, sort of thing. But it's very, very different for a journeyman.
I still think in some ways, well, it's quite similar if I sort of reflect on my own journey, because there's the times that you get caught up in the results or trying to do what other people are doing that the fun is lost in it, because then it's like, oh, I need to do this, or I need to perform at this or whatever. And when it's really just come back to, well, why do I even ride a bike? You know, you do it because you love it. You travel and you meet so many different people, and you know, when you're actually having fun, you end up performing better anyway. So it's like, well, you know, it's coming back to that process thing all the time, and why you do what you do.
No, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And I guess, have you got the next big thing? You know, is it just enjoying?
No, I'm very happy. And I had that when I did my last Ironman, when I did one too many, I was totally burnt out. And I had 2 years where I didn't really have any very goaly things on. And I quite enjoyed it. I just sort of wombled my way, did little things. And then swim run turned up, and I thought, well, that sounds fun, let's give that a go. But I wasn't very competitive about it. It was just a bit of a laugh, really.
But just doing it for a bit of fun.
Yeah.
So are you back in the pool? Now?
Two, 3 times a week. Nothing huge. I'm putting on a bit of weight, Karen. I need a nutritionist. I'm trying to explain to Andy, who gets very frustrated with how bad I am at cycling. She doesn't seem to understand that how to rate is very simple. Her FTP is more than mine. I weigh half as much again as she does. That means that I would need to generate 330 watts in order to be on the same powder weight that she is. Believe me, I'm not generating 330 watts.
Did you actually, just on that, did you need to put weight on for that swim, like with the cold water? Because they often, is that something that they take into account for English?
Good question. Some people do. I didn't really want to. I find it very difficult to lose weight these days. And I'm quite, sort of thick set, I suppose, rather than big. So I was a bit reluctant to turn into a big fatty. But there are some guys who, a lot of open water swimmers are really quite well insulated. But at the end of last season, the season where it didn't go, we didn't go because of the weather and everything. Phil said, it'll be fine, we'll go next year, you'll be successful, we're going to go earlier when it's warmer. But the only thing you've got to do is you have to swim in Wellington Harbour right the way through the year without a wetsuit. We didn't talk about this. So this swim, this is English Channel rules. So you're allowed a pair of togs, 1 swim cap, not 2, and a pair of goggles. That's it. And you can cover yourself in grease if you feel. And that helps, actually. You cover your vital organs. So it's a little bit of insulation. And he said, and what you'll find is it gets easier when you're doing the swimming through the weather. This is nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. I mean, you get used to it and you adapt, but it's no fun. It's still flipping 9 degrees, which is really cold. So again, I dragged all my friends. We have a swim squad on a Wednesday morning in the pool right next to the sea. So I was sort of going, okay, team, who's coming for a swim in the harbour with me? And then, it's like around this point of the year, sort of late summer, early autumn, everyone's in for it, and it's all very jolly. And then about 3 months later, you know, it's like crickets.
Everyone's like, I'm busy.
Yeah, that's right.
I've got things to do.
Got stuff on. Thanks very much for the offer. So, but I was good with that actually. I kept it, and again, friends, you know, my friend Sarah, who I keep on talking about, she's really slight, so she's not at all good in the cold. So the poor thing, she came with me, and she's like completely blue when we came out. Sort of unbelievably loyal. But apparently what happens is you get the physical adaptation is that your vital organs develop a little bit of a fat layer around them. So it's not that you turn into a big butterball, but you're protecting your organs slightly. It's the brown fat that's apparently very unhealthy, but it definitely works, because my cold tolerance is way better than it was a year ago. And actually that bit at the end of the swim I was talking about, those last 2 hours where the temperature was 16 not 18, I was fine actually, because I knew it was going to happen. And I thought, well, I've swum in much colder than this, so yeah, you're good. But in terms of putting weight on, I deliberately didn't do that, because I didn't want to turn into a big lard cake.
I love the descriptions of that. Is there anything else that I have missed that you thought, like info from that swim, or, you know, preparation? Or actually, one other question I do have is, how do you go about, I guess, choosing your adventures, you know, in terms of you know, the swim, or even coming along to something like this? You know, do you have certain criteria, or consciously or unconsciously, that you often think about for these things?
Nice places. Yes, a lot of it's about nice places. So Mandy and I came here 16 years ago to do an orienteering event actually. And I'm pretty sure that one of the forests that we orienteered in is the St Helens forest that we were in yesterday, because it must have been, because we stayed in St Helens. But it was before mountain biking was a thing, right?
Yeah, there wouldn't have been the trails or anything here.
So that's extraordinary. We've got all these cute photos of our son aged about 4, and now he's this 21-year-old, you know. So nice places. I mean, I think I talked about the importance of Cook Strait. The Maori people are very big on places that have a significance for you and your history, if you like. And although I don't have a history in New Zealand, the fact we've lived in Wellington for 25 years and Cook Strait is something you see every day. We swim in the harbour. It's all very much part of my journey. So that got me to do a big ocean swim, which doesn't, because a lot of people say, what's next? It must be Fovo Strait, which is the sort of the third swim in what they call the New Zealand Triple Crown. So you do Lake Taupo, Cook Strait. So Fovo Strait is between Stewart Island, which is at the bottom of the South Island, and Bluff, which is the tip of the South Island, and that is completely freezing and completely full of sharks. So that's where the sharks breed. Great white sharks.
Oh, and
that holds no appeal at all. So I have no interest at all in doing that. And most of the other marathon, this sort of Ocean 7 I was talking about, that doesn't really appeal. So it's probably just waiting until something
comes up that's
my interest. Sort of take up kite surfing or something random
like that. Any other mountain bike events on the horizon?
Oh God, no. I've done well. I need something easy. Somebody was saying the one in Western Australia, is that the
Cape to Cape?
Cape to Cape is not too technically difficult. So I think, because it's been good doing this together, but because I don't really like the technical stuff and I'm not very good at it, there would be no point doing anything any harder. I mean, even the first 2 days were testing me a bit.
Definitely. To get through like the trails that you've got through over the 3 days, it's pretty amazing. For especially that on the first day, that descent, it definitely has some moments on it. Fun, but it was good actually. Mandy and I went out the day beforehand and rode what turned out actually several of the earlier trails in the day, and that was really great because it is all this specificity and preparation and everything. And I was thinking, to have spent
Well, to have been here a few times before and to be more familiar with the terrain.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you've probably raced in Rotorua in New Zealand.
Yeah.
The design of the trails is very, very similar to Rotorua. There are quite a few of them where the shape of the trails as it went over the hillside, it really reminded me. But Rotorua is not rocky, so that's the big difference.
Yes.
And again, somewhere like that, which I've been to quite a lot, that's all very familiar and comfortable. But you come here and it's like, rocks.
What are these weird things? Who put that there?
Whereas Wellington is really rocky, and I don't like it very much because it's. So I don't do all of that. But yeah, so the specificity of the prep is key. And I suppose if I'd been more serious about it, we might have done something a bit more. But Mandy was saying she actually quite enjoys riding trails unseen. It's a challenge.
Yes, yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's I think something with sort of stage racing, going to a different place that you've never ridden before, and you kind of don't know what you're coming up or what's going to be coming up. So it is sort of part of the fun sometimes. I think you've got to be at a certain level of competence technically for that to be fun, as opposed to just incredibly stressful. Well, true, yes, but I guess it would be like putting us into the open water and trying to swim and navigate something like that.
It's not as technical though, swimming. It's quite simple, really. You do just get in and swim. I mean, there's a little bit of.
Although to be able to swim well, it is technically very hard.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think it's like something like tennis. The joy in tennis. It's the specifics of each individual shot and reading what's happening and working out what you need to do to respond to it. And I think things like mountain biking are quite like that. There's an adrenaline thing, but there's also a problem. It's a sort of mini problem solving thing. It's like, here's the trail and I'm on my bike and I'm travelling along and I've just got to find a route, execute the route, and then see what's coming next, and so that's a problem solving thing. But swimming isn't like that, really. I mean, sure, the conditions change and you think, okay, I've got to do this differently because the wind's doing this or whatever. But I think when you're not as quick-witted as you guys, that's why for me mountain bike is quite stressful, because
it all comes very fast.
And coordination's not that good, so I can't even do what I want to do.
But I guess that comes with practice, though, as well.
To a point, I think there's a physical limit to it, though. I think because I've been mountain biking for a long time. I've been mountain biking 35 years. Pioneer in the UK. One of my mates in the UK was really early into it. Before there were any specific single track anywhere in the world, really. But I do think your sort of natural tendencies sort of take you in different directions. But it's still fun.
Oh, well, thank you so much for chatting and sharing all your insights about your swim.
John,
I know. I could just ask so many questions. It's so interesting. And it's such an amazing journey and achievement doing that.
Oh, not at all. It's been lovely to chat.
Yeah.
Lovely to meet you, Karen. Legend.
Thanks, John.